boy Tahir Johnson. Guess I'm still trying to play around, see, still Diddy, man. But anyway, what's good with y'all, man? We back with another episode of the Cannabis Diversity Report. It's been a minute, man, since I seen y'all, but I'm honored to be back, man. It's been a busy day in the process of everything open, working on opening up the dispensary. Just came back from the Pennsylvania State Capitol today, testifying in their legalization hearing. But man, we got a big week coming up as we approach 420, man. The 420 Unity Day of Action is coming up, man. And my good brother Jason Ortiz, man, with Last Prisoner Project is the organizer. So I'm honored to be able to have him on the show. Jason has been one of my people that have been one of my influences from day one in cannabis. The MCBA Lobby Day, what I attended in 2019 was my first real introduction to advocacy in the industry. And Jason was one of the superstars there. I'll never forget watching them, seeing just everybody, seeing how everybody was moving and act, and how that stuff is forever influenced the way that I do things in the industry. And we've seen Jason move from being president of MCBA to leading SSDP to now in his new role at Last Prisoner Project, where he's doing big things. So I'm honored to be sitting with you today. Jay, pull up on me, man. What's good?
There we go. What
I'm doing, bro?
Doing good, brother. Doing good. I'm excited. It's a wild time. It's a legendary time. I'm excited. The Year of the Dragon is happening, and next week we're gonna really bring some fire to DC.
Yes, sir, man. Nah, I can't wait, bro. This is about to be a big week. I know you've been planning, doing so much behind the scenes, probably for weeks now, man. You got to be tired, bro.
I'm tired. I lost my voice already. I was actually just at a big festival last week. I had to recharge my batteries a little bit, get my dancing legs worked out. And so now I'm ready to put on a suit and tie and go to the halls of power and really tell them what's up on full legalization. But, this has been in the work for months, actually. It was back in November where we had a Left-Right Alliance meeting that happened where we really decided we got to do something this year. The time is now. We can all agree that we need full legalization. That's what will advance all of our causes. And back at that time, everybody committed to actually fighting this fight, bringing it to 420. And we got 30 different organizations so far that have joined on to the Unity Day of Action. You can go to lastprisonerproject.org for more information. But we got folks like Students for Sensible Drug Policy and Law Enforcement Action Partnership. So both students and law enforcement. We got Native American leaders. We got small business owners. We got progressive activists and conservative activists and libertarian activists, all ready to roll on the one thing that will work for all of us, which is full legalization. And that's where it really is building not just the infrastructure for how we're going to finally end the war on cannabis, but it's also a way that we can reach out to the 70% of Americans that support the legalization of cannabis. And so it's really the first time I think we've all come together in a genuine way to get things, really done. And it's been beautiful to see it happen, right? There's just so many folks involved. And we're going to have a giant press conference to make sure the media hears us. We're going to have a giant lobby day to make sure we get inside the building, actually go into the offices and talk to the folks directly. And then we're going to have a giant vigil at the White House to remind President Biden that there's still 3,000 cannabis prisoners in federal prison and that he has the power to release them if he so chooses. And so we're really going to make sure we hit all of the boxes, check all the boxes, cross our T's, dot all of our I's. And really, in a historic way, put out the roadmap for how this can be done in the future and make sure that we have the relationships necessary to do it in the next Congress and forever until we win. I can't hear his audio.
And here I am on mute, man. Just talking.
There you go.
But I was saying, man, it's not a small thing seeing all these organizations come together, right? I know MCBA, we're going to be participating, like you said, so many organizations from everybody's going to be there. So you typically don't see that. You see people, going around lobbying on their own issues. But you're right. This is something that everybody can, I think everybody in the industry can, one thing we can all agree on is that we need to legalize and fully legalize, and cannabis is the best option. And, I'm curious, over the past year, we've seen different stances from Biden. We've seen him make proclamations, saying that he supports people nobody should be in jail for cannabis and all these things. And we've seen like some movement towards rescheduling, but not really any action towards descheduling. Why do you think that is? And, what can we do to kind of move the needle on that?
Well, we're doing it. That's the thing, right? Is that we have to really recenter the conversation on criminal justice reform. I think what happened was over the last few years, as the industry kind of came into fruition, business needs really took over the conversation in a lot of ways, and for good reason, right? It was the first time we were ever going to have a cannabis business that we even had to talk about at all, right? And so, 4 or 5 years ago, taxes wasn't a problem because nobody was getting taxed. And so I do think that happened for a reason, and a lot of us helped make it happen, right? MCBA has been pushing for access to Small Business Administration resources. And so it was necessary for the time, right? But now we're at a point where, unfortunately, none of those bills are really moving anywhere. And the only bill that has been really talked about is safe banking. And that is not something that helps the general public or most folks that care about cannabis. And so we lost the ability to really mobilize the public. And so what I wanted to do was make sure that we brought the movement back and not take away from how the industry is moving, but making sure that we're also having a lane that is specific about criminal justice reform, because that is what the public really wants to talk about. It's what the elections are really going to be about. And that's what full legalization really comes down to, is removing criminal penalties. And so, in a lot of ways, some of our best activists went into the business space, right? Because we needed folks to start business like yourself, right? Like, yeah. I'm glad you have a dispensary. It just means we don't have you, knocking on the doors on criminal justice as much. But I think as a movement, we need to be able to do both and more. And this moment was really like my effort to say, we can't rely on the same people to do everything over and over again. We got to expand the tent. We got to expand the coalition. We got to bring new people in. And we have to have a venue for anybody that wants to participate in this movement, a way for them to get on board. So we don't have to rely on the folks who are already overworked to make phone calls or knock on doors, et cetera. So this was really that effort to reframe what it means to be part of the movement and who is part of the movement, recenter the conversation on criminal justice reform so that the public can really get involved, and also re-inspire each other. I think we were in a bit of a down place for a couple of years where we lost a lot of battles. We weren't really making a lot of progress, although states were coming on board, right? So there was definitely more public support, but internally folks were getting tired. And so I wanted to make sure we did something that inspired folks, that really brought everyone together, that reminded us how fun it is to do this work together, and really light a fire in our bellies, light a fire under the ass of our president, right? And really get things charged on an emotional level in ways that haven't happened before. So I felt that was sort of like my role in making sure the movement grew and came with enough fights in them to really get things done. Because the reality is, we're not going to be able to pass anything significant on our own as a small group, right? Like, we would have done it already if that's possible. So we have to grow. We have to bring new people in. We have to bring in groups that don't even talk about drug policy at all, right? And figure out how we can help them understand how this helps everyone. And that's what this moment is going to be a chance for us to remind each other of how powerful we are. And also during an election year, make this a conversation that happens at a typical, kitchen table in Ohio, or the folks that are wondering about the Florida, ballot measure, or folks that are in California already and figure out how to fix things, or people in Connecticut that have a small industry but are really looking for federal legalization, or the big one, the entire South that is going to need federal legalization to really be able to kick open the door there to really eliminate those criminal penalties. So by going to DC, by uniting, you're making this an issue that goes beyond just cannabis, aficionados, and really to that average mom, pop, grandma, cousins that are going to have to talk about this when they see us turning up in DC.
Right. Nah, man. And you're right, man. That's such a good point. What you mentioned is, I think the balancing act that I live, right? Like, going from coming into the game purely is just focused on advocacy to now having a business, right? I definitely realize how, of course, man, I've always been an advocate for safe banking, but even more so now, right? Because I see firsthand the way, like, all of those, the impacts of business and banking that it has, access, like we said, access to the SBA, how that could help the business. Of course, there's this conversation about rescheduling is going on separate from descheduling. And of course, the big thing that a lot of us are excited about is that with Solve 280E. But like you said, none of those things, while it sounds good or fly for somebody like me that's in business, like it doesn't change anything on anybody getting out of jail, right? And I always try to make sure I think of that, because I mean, that has been me too. And so when we look at the future generations having the opportunity to make sure that, that nobody else ever has to be sitting inside a cell or anything like that for weed is is the top priority. So I'm curious, like, what do you think about, I guess, like when people in like even that incrementalist kind of approach, what are kind of your thoughts on that? And how, does it take away from the narrative or the movement towards like full descheduling, or like how do you balance the two, especially somebody that's been like working in the industry for so long, fighting for progress?
So I don't think it hurts either side to talk about what we want and what is practical, right? And so the thing with rescheduling is it is progress, and we should take credit for pushing the government to a place where they have to say, we have to change something, right? Like, that is historic. There's no doubt about it. This is the first time that any president has really felt forced to change the status of cannabis. And so there's nothing bad about that. Like, that is progress. That is a W, no doubt about it, right? It's just a small W, right? And I think he himself, our president, promised much more. And what we always want to do with political action is very clearly articulate what it is that you want. And you want to say fully what you want. Let them walk back what they think is practical. But when we speak to the public, when we speak to elected officials, we want the end of the war on our communities and nothing less, right? We could talk about the details of how we get there and what bill might do this or that, right? There's 3 big bills that would fully deschedule. There's smaller bills like HOPE and SAFE, right, that would fix other significant problems in the space. But we have no reason to negotiate against ourselves by getting anything less than what we want as our main message. Right now, as we start to work through and meet different folks, there may be different Congress people that support one or not the other, right? And so we should encourage those folks to support the ones that they're willing to support and move the ones that we can move, because we always want momentum to be going forward, right? But I don't think that they're necessarily contradictory. There's a lot of folks out there in the space that do think that they are oppositional, right? And personally, I don't. I think it's a step forward. I think, though, that it's a mistake to say we should internally accept a half measure proactively. That right. Doesn't make sense.
No victory flag yet. Like, it's still work to do. You're right.
Right. And, and say thank you. And the next day after rescheduling, we still want descheduling. Right. And so it doesn't have to slow us down. I think this is a thing where I do disagree with some other folks. It is momentum building for us, right? Like, we should be able to take any progress and build on that over and over again. So the other piece with rescheduling is that it is a bit outside of our hands in the timing. So they may say they are talking about rescheduling and take 5 years to do that, right? We can't wait for that to happen to push for what we really want, right? And so we have to push immediately now, always, every day, for what we really want, which is full descheduling, because that's what forces rescheduling to happen faster. And so there is a broader strategy here, right? And that's why movements are so much more powerful than individual organizations, because it means we can walk and chew bubblegum at the same time. It means there can be organizations that say not good enough and organizations that say this is progress, working together to keep the march of progress happening in the right direction. And so the unity piece is so important for that, because it means we have doctors that can speak to medical issues. We have veterans that can speak to the VA. We have Native Americans that can speak to insider issues, right? There's lots of different messengers that we can have advancing the cause. And that's what's most important. I think getting tied up sometimes too much in the specific bills, because really what it all comes down to is, do we have sufficient power to pass legislation that we want? The answer is almost definitely no right now, right? Because we haven't united and brought everyone together. So you got the best policy in the world. And if you can't pass it, it doesn't matter, right? You bring 10 million people with you. Now the details of your policy matter, because now there's going to be enough congressional folks that want to join you on that fight. So my job is to bring the 10 million people, right? There are plenty of people that can write the policy that I trust, plenty of people within Last Prisoner Project that are fantastic, legislative bill writers, but somebody's got to mobilize the public. Somebody's got to give an on-ramp for new activists. And that's what this moment is. And that's what 420 really is as a cultural moment. And I want to make sure that we have sufficient people power that whenever we get in the position to actually push for what we want, that we can get it. And it's not fake smoke and mirrors. It's that they have to do it because we're so powerful.
Yeah. And bro, let's talk about organizing a little bit more too, because I know that, for like when I think of organizers in the industry, you're certainly one of the people that I think of at the top of the list being the best in the game. And I know like that's like your real superpower, bro. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like you said, there's so many people, like we have a lot of smart people that are like the lawyers that can write the policy, but you're not a lawyer or nothing like that, right? But you're right there along the lines, like waving the flag. Like, and I love what you said about like setting the stage for that next generation of advocates, right? Because there's those of us that have been out here for years, and you've been out here before me. And so many people ask, like, how do you lobby? How do you like go and talk to your members, right? How do you testify, in front of a legislative body? So could you kind of just maybe drop some of those best practices or keys? What are some of the like gems that you have about organizing or speaking to elected officials about the issues that you've learned over the years?
Oh, that's a good question. I will say first, like one of the big reasons we do this is so that we're showing folks how to do it, not just telling them, right? Like you have to actively go do it. Like it's hard to learn how to lobby without feeling the pressure of being in a room with a staffer or an actual elected official. So come to DC and, on the 18th, so you can get firsthand experience. Because like yourself, you came, relatively new to the space, wanted to figure it out. You're like, I'm just going to jump in it. And now you're the president of a trade association that was going to influence policy for decades to come, right? And so that's the thing, just jump in it. The biggest thing that I always want folks to remember is they work for you, right? They are our employees. They work on our tax dollars, and we have the upper hand in this situation because they require us to keep them elected. And often young folks or anybody will come in and say, I don't know enough about this issue to really like push on a legislator. The legislators are there to represent you, whether you're educated on an issue or not. If you want to push, there should be a new bridge built in my neighborhood because I think the bridge should be repaired. You don't have to be an engineer to say, fund that bridge, right? Because you know that people need it. And the same thing for drug policy. Generally speaking, if you're even a little bit involved, you do know more than the elected official and their staff on that particular issue. And definitely if you come to any of our trainings, you will absolutely know more. So the thing that folks should know is that any staffer works on 20 different issues, right? And any elected official works on 100 different issues. So they're not going to be an expert, and you should walk in there like you are the expert and you're the person that matters. So both on a personal power basis, like you don't have to have a PhD in anything to tell them what you want. It's your representative. They're there to serve you. That is their job, right? So if you had somebody that was there to clean your house, right, you would say, I want the living room and the bedroom cleaned, right? You don't need to know like about the chemicals that are going to be used. You just say, this is what I want because you work for me, right? That's how you should treat the folks there. You should be respectful, right? Like just like nobody should disrespect, say, your waitress or the person that, is serving food or something like that. Like there's no reason to be mean to them, but they are there to help you. And you are more likely than not to be able to know more about this issue. And the last thing I'll say is, they're also more likely than not to be supportive, right? Depending on your party, but even within the Republican Party, there's definitely lots of folks that support cannabis legalization. So it's not always like a combative kind of thing, right? Sometimes your congressperson is fantastic and they want your help and they want to learn more. So don't go into it thinking that it's going to be this like really difficult thing where you take a test on policy, because that's just not exactly how it is. It tends to be a young person that's a staffer on, say, the Judiciary Committee. They may even say something like, hey, personally, I support this. Privately, the rep supports it, but publicly, we can't actually come out about it. And that's a very likely situation where you want to be able to say, well, how can we provide you the political cover necessary to be able to be public about it? And that's a very different conversation. They may say, yeah, I need you to do a rally in my office and demand it, right? In order for them to say, I'm coming out in favor of this because my constituents demanded it. Yep. But you have to ask. The last thing I'll say is don't make any assumptions about anybody that works in any office. Right? That is always going to be a bad idea. Ask a lot of questions. Even if you don't know a lot of details, you can always ask a lot of questions. And that's a good role for someone that's never lobbied before, is to come in with a list of questions you're going to ask and then use that information to figure out your move is the next time you lobby.
Yes, man, you dropped some good ones right there. And one of the things you made me think of is I think a lot of people, especially if you're new to this, may not know the way government necessarily works. And so there are certain powers and certain things that members of Congress can achieve, and there's certain powers and certain things that President Biden can do. Can you talk a little bit? And again, I know President Biden took some different actions and stuff earlier this year. Could you talk about some of the things for people that may not really know some of the steps that he actually took? What did it actually do? And what did it actually not do? You know what I mean? To kind of clarify some of the rhetoric that's been out there.
Sure. So there's three branches of government. There's the executive branch, the judicial branch, and the legislative branch, right? The executive branch is the president, and all of the departments like the DEA, House Homeland Security, the Department of State, right? All of the departments, the Department of Labor, all of that falls under the president. He is the executive of all of that, and then he appoints different folks to lead all of those agencies. So the president can't tell all these different agencies what to do, mostly, right? Like, it's not an unlimited power, but he can't always say, I'll fire the head of that department and replace it with somebody that will do what he wants. So there's that soft power of like, they maybe don't have the explicit, like they can just force everybody to do whatever they want, but they'll just fire them if they're not, in line with their politics. And then you have the legislative branch, which is Congress, which has two main chambers, the Senate, which is exactly 100 members, that each state gets 2 senators. And then you have the House, which is 435 Congress people, which is by population. The House generally is more radical or progressive, or not even progressive, just more likely to take action because they have smaller constituencies. And the Senate tends to be the wet blanket on everything, right? Where it's like the older folks, the boomers, and they just go, no, 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 no. So a lot of cool bills will start in the House and then die in the Senate, right? So that's why we believe the Senate is actually where we have to do more work, is to get the senators on board. It also makes it a bit easier to like work within your state because the whole state has the same 2 senators. So like for me in Connecticut, it's Chris Murphy and Richard Blumenthal are my 2 senators. So that means whether you live in Bridgeport or New Haven or New London, we have the same senators and we can work together. Now the third branch is the judicial branch, and that's where all the courts are, the court systems. And so those are run by judges with the Supreme Court at the top of that system. And so they can all do different things. I'll start with Congress. Congress has the power of the purse. It's the budget for the entire government. That's the biggest power. They set where the money goes, right? Including the budget for the executive branch in a lot of ways. So what funds the Pentagon, for example, right, goes through Congress. What funds the DEA goes through Congress. What funds the Department of Labor goes through Congress. They can also pass legislation, and they are the ultimate governing body when it comes to passing laws, that when Congress passes a law, that is the final say, unless it's unconstitutional, which the Supreme Court would dictate. But the Congress doesn't need any information or any restrictions on passing legislation. They can do literally whatever they want as far as passing laws go, short of things being unconstitutional, which they can still pass it, right, and force the Supreme Court to figure it out. Now, the president is in charge of, say, the military and a lot of these other departments, but he's also the head of the federal incarceration system. So the actual prisons and the jails in the federal system. And he has what is called the power to commute or pardon folks. And commuting a sentence is where you don't necessarily say that it was wrong that they were arrested, but you're ending their time to wherever it is right now, and you let them out of prison. And so he does have the power to commute sentences of the 3,000 federal folks in federal prison that are currently incarcerated for cannabis. President Biden can let them all out immediately tomorrow if he really wanted to. And he has let folks out. He's actually let folks out that were in there for much harsher drugs than cannabis. And so he has the power to do it. He has done it for other people. And unfortunately, even our last president actually released more people than our current president did. And so it is the number one thing that if we can all really pressure our president right now, he doesn't need Congress to do this. He can let them all out. We've actually sent multiple letters to the president. We have 150 people specifically that are like the very easy ones to be able to move folks out. And President Biden just needs to make the decision to do that. Despite the fact that Kamala, Vice President Harris has been very clear. She's supportive of legalization, right? President Biden has been talking a lot. This is the one action that doesn't require him to ask anybody else's permission, and he's not doing it. And so that's why I think this election season, the number one ask we should have with President Biden is to let folks out of prison, because it's not a complicated process. Like, he has a pardon attorney, Elizabeth Oyer, who we've been working with very closely. He just needs to have the political will and to say, I'm going to make this a priority and do it.
Yeah, and I see we got a question from the audience. Somebody asked if there's any thoughts on Nevada's Supreme Court decision on descheduling cannabis in Nevada, and would a decision like that fuel the fire to deschedule at the federal level? You have any thoughts on that, Jay?
I don't know the details of this particular one, so definitely, drop it in the
This
chat.
first, this first I've heard of this. This is the first I've heard
Yeah,
of.
right. Yeah, I don't know, but I mean, any progress absolutely adds fuel to the fire, right? Like
Yeah.
the fire has been burning for a long, long time, and so anytime we can throw some extra logs on that fire will be helpful, no doubt about it. I'd be interested in the justification for it or what exactly happened, because the other thing that is helpful is when a lower court does make a legal argument for why they're doing something, you can use that in other places. And so that is super helpful. So like the legal team that is moving on that, I'd love to see their justification for it and how they did it. All states have a bit of a different process, but yeah, absolutely. I think it's great. Any state that is seriously talking about it. The interesting thing is that like states all interact with the Controlled Substances Act differently. And so some are very tied, like if the Federal Controlled Substances Act changes, it automatically changes. But I think it's just Louisiana that does that. The rest of them have their own thing going on. So kind of depends, where the states are at and where it moves. But it's definitely progress if somebody's talking about it.
Yeah, progress is progress. And like you said, every state is different.
W's a W, man. We just got to keep stacking them up one after another. And then it becomes undeniable. It already is, in my opinion, undeniable. But it really becomes undeniable where we need to go every time another W hits the board.
Yeah. And, we actually just, jumped right in the beginning, but I didn't get a chance to have you even talk more about. I know I kind of assumed that anybody watching this show knows what LPP is.
Sure.
But really, Last Prisoner Project, even outside of just organizing this week, is such an important organization. In my opinion, one of the most important organizations in the industry, especially because, again, as we start talking about, like, there's so much focus on the business and economic side of cannabis, right? Like making sure that all of these people who have been arrested for cannabis, not even just by having a place in the industry, just get home, right? Like not even just not being in jail, starting there. And you guys have been leaders on that. So many people who are good friends, they've been worked and been a part of, helping to bring them home. So just for people that may not know, I guess talk a little bit more about what LPP is, what the mission is, and what have been some of the biggest victories that you guys have been able to have, recently that you're proud of.
Sure. And I can even tell a little bit about my personal background too, because it definitely, all coalesced in this position in ways that I never thought possible. It is a dream job. It's a dream organization to work for. And the Last Prisoner Project is a 501c3 nonprofit. And we seek to make sure that every single person that is currently incarcerated for cannabis crimes is able to be reunited with their families and have a long, healthy life as a regular citizen of society. And right now there's at least 3,000 folks incarcerated for cannabis crimes at the federal level, and probably closer to 40,000 folks incarcerated at the state level. And as somebody, I was arrested for cannabis possession as a 16-year-old kid in high school. And I was walking on the way to school, smoking with some friends. Somebody ratted on us and called the school on the way in. Security guards surrounded us. And, it's one of those things, like, I wasn't in trouble that much, right? But to have a cop come in and put cuffs on me for the first time will radically change your life and how you feel about policy, right? Because he took me away from school. I got thrown out of school for a year and a half. And, it ruined my life at the time. It ripped me from my support structure. I was lucky enough to not get incarcerated because I had very strong, supportive parents, especially my mom, who really fought for me to make sure I finished high school and didn't get caught up into the criminal justice system. But it cost us tens of thousands of dollars in lawyers. And they were two union working parents. That was not money that we had back in the year 2001. And so to come now and, work on these policies, and, that was the moment that made me an activist. But it was organizations like Students for Sensible Drug Policy, when I did go to the University of Connecticut, that taught me how to turn that anger into strategy, into progress, into action, into law. And I do think as you develop a relationship with the law, right, and cops, and you can be very antagonistic with the system, but it was NCBA where we really started to bring people of color together to figure out, how do we write the law? How do we design the government in a way that would work for us? How do we figure out what exactly it is that we want? How do we do all of that? So we're not just fighting this bad system, but we're replacing it with something better. And, Jesse Horton always said, we want to make a better industry, not just another industry. And so that experience really helped me understand that the law is a tool, and certain communities have used it against us for a very long time. And we can flip the script and learn how to design the future that we want and write it down in the legal system. And so I got to see a bit more of the positive aspects of public policy. But, as things developed, it was like, okay, well, this section is advancing quite a bit, but Jason, the 16-year-old kid, would still be locked up right now if it wasn't, for the folks that really focused on criminal justice reform. So I felt like I didn't want to go back and really focus on making sure that we weren't leaving behind those who are currently incarcerated. There have been far too many folks that were locked up under the crime bill of the 90s, which President Biden was one of the chief sponsors of, that are still incarcerated today, right? So like Edwin Ruiz got 40 years in the 90s for trafficking, for selling weed, for selling less than a lot of dispensaries sell in a month, right? And so he got 40 years, he's served 26 years, and he has 14 more to go. You imagine he got locked up in the 90s, he's still incarcerated and knows that the cannabis industry is happening, but his kids are growing up, his family are getting older, people are dying, he's missing, people graduating, he's missing first dates. He actually, and this is like one of the saddest parts, is that I got to really meet him. His son was in his mom's belly when he got incarcerated, and now he's 26 years old. And his dad has been locked up his entire life over weed. Nobody got hurt in the interaction. And so it's just wild to be able to both help the situation, but be so knee deep in the hypocrisy around how policy happens, that Last Prisoner Project was the type of work I really wanted to do. And at its core, the Last Prisoner Project is legal support for the folks that are currently incarcerated. So we have a whole criminal justice institute that we work with the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers to provide legal support and help folks go through the process of commutations or pardons or expungements or parole boards or whatever it is that they need to deal with. And then we provide financial support for the families, and also for folks when they get released, a $5,000 grant. And LPP has actually redistributed over $3 million in support for folks that are currently incarcerated. And so, it's very direct support. It can be really difficult stories that we have to kind of learn about. But at the same time, I've never felt like my work was more impactful or necessary, or something that literally is getting people years of their life back. That could be the time when they get to see their daughter get married, or their son start a new business, or their grandkids, go to kindergarten for the first time.
Yeah, man, it's a beautiful, amazing thing, and thank you for all the work that you're doing with that, man. And you made your rounds, man. Like you said, you paid your dues from being an MCBA to SSDP. Like you said, it's like you've been prepared. Like I said, really been getting prepared for like kind of every step of the way, man. So I know that's to be a good feeling.
It is, and to have Unity Day come full circle and bring everybody back together, and everybody's at the same table, right? And it's like, I've worked with so many orgs in different capacities, like Supernova Women and DPA, right? Like I've had such incredible experiences with all my homies, like Amber and Kat Packer. They were the ones.
Oh my God, y'all had the dopest event out there. Y'all had the craziest.
Rosario, baby.
I would have seen it, man. Talk about that event, man. What was that like?
So this was another surreal moment, man. So shout out to Amber Sensor, Supernova Women, just consistently crushing it all the time. But she really wanted to have an event on the West Coast for all the activists in Oakland, right, who really invented equity policies to make sure that they could participate, they could get inspired by the work we're doing in DC, because it's really far, so not many folks in California be able to go. So homegirl Amber was able to rally one of my favorite people in the world, Rosario Dawson, Ahsoka Tano, the greatest warrior in the galaxy as it stands right now, just to be clear. And, to be able to do a press conference in support of the 420 Unity Day of Action. And it was wild. Like they had me wait for her outside, and I was like really just kicking it with her. She was chilling. I was like, that was crazy. And splitting Oreo cupcake with her, bro. Like it was so wild because they had me go out and wait for her. And as soon as she gets out of the car, she doesn't have any real security. And I went to shake her hand. I'm like, hey, my name is Jason Ortiz, and she immediately hugs me. And I was just like, oh, you're so beautiful and amazing, and did so many cool things. And she was super chill, right? But we did, go over her speech, and I was able to write some of the words that she said. And so, dude, it was such a surreal, amazing experience in the moment because everybody crushed it, right? Like it was one of those times where we brought the heavy hitters out and we're like, we're going to do this thing. And as I'm standing there, I'm like, we are doing it. Like this is really happening. This is not, we need to level up again and again. Like we're there. We have A-list celebrities that are here. People are coming out with fire when it comes to the policies that we're talking about. People know what they're saying, right? Like Kat Packer of DPA knows exactly what we need to do in a policy sense. And it was just undeniable, right? Like, I really focus on trying to make sure that we bring some emotional connections for folks in this space, that it's not just about laws, but this is real human beings that we're talking about. And our work is going to affect real families. And to see us hit all of the right buttons at the same time, and then have somebody as amazing as Rosario Dawson come and support us, it just made me so confident that we're able to win whatever battle we put our minds to. And, and after the like press conference happened, we were chilling, right? We went to this place and like we were buying food and drinking. I was talking to her about Puerto Rican independence for a minute. Like that was probably my favorite moment in the whole thing. We were spitting like about Puerto Rico. And it was just wild. And it reminded me that when we believe in each other, when we support each other, when we don't let stupid petty drama get in the way of things, when you show up and say, Amber, I trust you, whatever you're going to do at this event, I think is going to be amazing. And just like, tell me where to be, incredible things can happen. And I really wanted to make sure that this event brought that energy to the space, that like when we choose to support each other, we can make magic. And that is how we need to do this to make it really happen, is over and over and over again, be there for each other and dream as big as possible. Because if you would have told me I was going to be chilling with Rosario Dawson for an afternoon, I would say, nah, it's never going to happen. That's silly. But it did. We looked amazing. And like, I got to really like kick it with her. It was wild.
Yeah. And that's one of those amazing things, like to see her using her influence, like you said, literally one of the biggest actors in the world. I think I read some statistics. She might be like the biggest or something, like in some type of way, you know what I mean?
Star Wars. Yeah.
So like using that influence for that, you know what I mean? That's huge, bro.
Yeah.
And I think it just goes to show, like, again, how important and how big this issue is. And we need more people like that using their voices to do. And I know Last Prisoner Project, y'all have been really great at, pulling people like that into the mix. But shout out to Amber, man. That's another one of the people like you that I never got on here in the original run that I got to, now that I'm doubling back, got to get Amber up on here, man.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm. But Jay, man, I know you're busy, man. You spend a lot of time. I mean, you in DC already? Where you at now, man?
No, I live in Connecticut. I live in New London, Connecticut, actually. But I do drive to DC all the time. I was at a festival for the Eclipse. I actually got in last night at like 10 o'clock at night, and now I got a few days before we get down there. I'm going to be down there Monday. I leave Monday to go down to DC. So again, next week, Unity Day of Action is happening on April 18th. You can go to lastprisonerproject.org for more information. We have something to do for everyone that'll be there, whether you're ready to go to your representative and tell them what's up, or you just want to hang out with another group of people that are going to be doing cool things. We have something for everybody. And then the big thing will be a giant candlelit vigil in front of the White House at night, that we really want to be a time where not only do we remind everybody about those in prison, but we remind everybody why we're doing this work together, and show the president and the world that we have the policy, we have the heart, and we have the fire to really win this battle once we come together, which we're going to do on April 18th.
I will be there, bro, and I can't wait, man. I cannot wait for all of us to get together, man. Thank you, Jay, and I'll see you next week, my brother.
That's right. Let's go, man. I'm looking forward to putting you on stage. Hope you're ready to spit some fire.
Hey, man, I'm ready, man. Like I said, literally, like, and thank you, bro, again, just to give you your flowers, man. Like, again, I literally even still watch the videos, man. It was like you, Shanita, Brandon, Todd, Kayvon, like, all of y'all people, man. And literally day one, I didn't know anything about anything, and y'all just let me even stand there with you. And like I said, I've just been trying to, just ever since then, just trying to keep putting one step in front of the other, so you continue to inspire.
Not just trying, bro. You've been killing it. Like, don't sell yourself short. You got a dispensary. You're working with Wanda James, one of the heavy hitters that was one of the founders of MCBA. So, like, bro, taking that step, and I think this is a good way to end, right? It's because you made that choice to show up and do the thing, your life changed after that, right? And you kept making the choice to keep leveling up over and over again. That's why I encourage everybody at home, make the choice to show up, and I guarantee you it'll be one of the best choices you ever make in your life.
Amen. Well, I'll see you there, my brother.
All right, brother. Thank you so much. An honor and a pleasure as always, brother. Keep up the good work. And I got you. You need anything, you need me to go to Jersey, throw down, I'm with you.
Back at you, man. Thank you, man.
All right.
Peace.
Awesome, brother.